Chapter 20. The Hollow Throne. The throne room of Valenhart Castle had become a battlefield. Tapestries that had hung for centuries lay in smouldering heaps. Ancient chandeliers had crashed to the marble floor, their crystals scattered like diamond tears across the blood-stained stone. The great windows, once depicting the glory of vampire conquest, were shattered, allowing the first pale light of dawn to filter through in accusatory beams. In the center of this devastation stood three figures locked in a dance of death. King Renatus, his perfect face now marred by the acid burns of Isolde's blood, fought with the calculated fury of a millennium-old predator. His movements were precise, economical, each strike designed to kill, each parry executed with the confidence of one who had never truly known defeat. Cassian matched his father blow for blow, centuries of resentment fueling every thrust of his blade. Where the king was cold precision, Cassian was controlled passion, his eyes burning with the same crimson fire that had first awakened when he tasted Isolde's blood in the temple gardens a lifetime ago. And between them moved Isolde herself, the thorn crown still embedded in her flesh, blood streaming down her face in rivulets that seemed to glow with inner light. She fought differently than the immortals, not with their supernatural speed or strength, but with the desperate conviction of one who carried the future within her womb. Isolde and Cassian moved as a single entity, his strength flowing into her when she faltered, her insight guiding his blade when the king's defences seemed impenetrable. Their followers had cleared the throne room at Cassian's command, forming a protective perimeter outside to ensure no loyalists could interfere. This battle was personal, a reckoning centuries in the making, a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of a kingdom, but the shape of prophecy itself. "You cannot win," the king snarled, parrying a thrust from Cassian while simultaneously evading Isolde's dagger. "This rebellion will end as all the others have, with the deaths of those foolish enough to challenge me." "This is different," Cassian replied, pressing his advantage as the king's foot slipped in a pool of blood. "This time, it's not about politics or power. It's about the future you're too afraid to allow." The king laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Afraid? I've ruled for 1,000 years. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've outlived gods themselves. What could I possibly fear from a wayward son and his mortal whore?" As if in answer, the child within Isolde stirred, its power pulsing. The throne room trembled, dust and debris falling from the vaulted ceiling as ancient magics responded to the heir's presence. The king's eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine surprise he had shown. "So," he whispered, "the prophecy is true. The abomination lives." "Our child," Isolde corrected, her voice steady despite the blood streaming from the thorn crown. "The bridge between worlds, the future you've tried so desperately to prevent." "Because I alone remember what such bridges once wrought," the king roared, his composure cracking for the first time. "I alone survived the cataclysm when immortal and mortal blood last mingled. I alone bear the scars of that unholy union." With sudden savage strength, he hurled Cassian across the throne room. Before Isolde could react, the king's hand closed around her throat, lifting her from the ground with terrible ease. "Let me show you," he hissed, his eyes boring into hers. "Let me show you what I've protected this kingdom from for a millennium." His mind crashed into hers with the force of a battering ram, bypassing the protection of the bond, driving directly into her consciousness with images so ancient and terrible that she could not defend against them. She saw a younger Renatus, still beautiful, still powerful, but with eyes that held something other than cold calculation. She saw him kneel before a woman whose features were obscured by a hood of midnight silk, whose hands glowed with power no mortal should possess. "I love her," the young king said simply. "I would give anything to be with her." "Even your soul?" the hooded woman asked, her voice echoing with inhuman harmonics. "Especially that," he replied without hesitation. The scene shifted. The young king stood in a circle of blood and fire, his arms wrapped protectively around a mortal woman with hair the colour of sunlight and eyes that held the same determination Isolde saw daily in her own reflection. Before them, creatures of nightmare clawed at an invisible barrier, things with too many limbs, too many eyes, faces that seemed to fold in upon themselves in ways that defied comprehension. "This is the price," the hooded woman said from outside the circle. "This is what comes when the veil between worlds thins, when mortal and immortal create what should not exist. We'll face it together," the young king declared, holding his mortal love closer. "No," the hooded woman said sadly, "you won't." With a gesture, she collapsed the protective circle. The nightmares surged forward. The memory fractured, becoming a kaleidoscope of horror. The mortal woman torn apart while the young king screamed helplessly, his own body ravaged by claws that left marks on his immortal soul rather than his flesh. The child they had created, already growing within her womb, devoured by things that hungered for possibility rather than flesh. And finally, the hooded woman standing over the broken king, her face finally revealed. Not human at all, but something ancient and terrible that merely wore the shape of humanity as a convenient disguise. "Remember this," she said, placing a hand on his ruined heart. "Remember what comes when the natural order is defied. Remember what happens when the veil thins." Her hand sank into his chest, fingers closing around something that should never be touched. "I curse you with memory," she intoned. "I curse you with clarity. I curse you with the wisdom to do what must be done, no matter the personal cost." The young king's scream echoed across centuries, carrying the pain of a loss too profound for words. When the memory finally released her, Isolde found herself on her knees, gasping for breath. The king stood over her, his eyes reflecting a pain so ancient and terrible that she could not help but feel a reluctant sympathy. "Now you understand," he said, his voice hollow. "Now you know what I've protected this kingdom from, what I've protected all of existence from." Across the throne room, Cassian struggled to his feet, his expression twisted with confused rage. Through their bond, he had glimpsed fragments of the king's memory, enough to shake his certainty but not enough to understand completely. "What was that?" he demanded, staggering toward them. "What did you show her?" The king turned to his son, something like pity entering his ancient eyes. "The truth I could never tell you, the reason I had to be the monster you believe me to be." "You slaughtered innocent people," Cassian snarled. "You executed anyone who dared love across the divide between mortal and immortal. You suppressed the old magic, rewrote our history." "To protect everyone," the king roared. "To maintain the veil between worlds. To prevent those things from ever finding another way through." "At what cost?" Isolde asked, struggling to her feet. The thorn crown seemed heavier now, its points digging deeper with every heartbeat. "How many lives destroyed? How many futures erased?" "As many as necessary," the king replied without hesitation. "I would burn this world to cinders before I allowed those abominations to return." "There must have been another way," Cassian said, moving to Isolde's side. "Some solution that didn't require 1,000 years of tyranny." The king's laugh was bitter. "I tried," he said simply. "For the first century, I searched for alternatives. I consulted oracles, summoned demons, bargained with entities beyond your comprehension. All confirmed what I already knew. The veil must be maintained. The natural order must be preserved." "And so you became its enforcer," Isolde said softly. "Its willing executioner." "Someone had to," the king replied. "Someone had to make the hard choices, bear the hatred, become the necessary monster." For a moment, just a moment, Cassian's resolve wavered. Through their bond, Isolde felt his uncertainty, his reluctant consideration of his father's justification. Don't listen to him, she urged. He's trying to manipulate you as he always has. The king's eyes flickered to her, narrowing with calculation. The prophecy speaks of a child who will bring change, he acknowledged. But it doesn't specify whether that change will be salvation or destruction. The seers who first recorded those words were mortal, limited in their understanding, blinded by their hope. He took a step toward them, his hand outstretched in a gesture almost like supplication. "Join me," he said to Cassian. "Understand what I've been fighting for all these centuries. Help me protect our kingdom, our world, from what lurks beyond the veil." Through the bond, Isolde felt Cassian's inner conflict, the son who had always sought his father's approval, warring with the man who had witnessed the king's countless cruelties. "And what of Isolde?" Cassian asked, his voice tight with tension. "What of our child?" The king's expression hardened. "You know what must be done," he said softly. "You've always known in your heart. That's why you fought your feelings for her so fiercely at first. Why you tried to send her away. Some part of you recognized the danger she represented." "No," Cassian said, but uncertainty colored the word. "Yes," the king insisted. "The same blood that flows through my veins flows through yours. The same curse binds us both. The curse of knowledge, of responsibility. I passed it to you the night of your first blooding, when you came of age. I showed you fragments of what I had witnessed, planted the seed of understanding that you've fought against your entire life." Isolde stared at Cassian, horrified understanding dawning. "Is this true?" she whispered. "Did you know?" He couldn't meet her eyes. "Not consciously," he admitted, the words seeming to tear themselves from his throat. "But there were dreams, nightmares of things beyond the veil, warnings that felt too real to be merely imagination." "Because they weren't," the king said. "They were memories, my memories, shared through our bloodline. The curse ensures that each generation remembers, that each king understands what's at stake." The thorn crowns suddenly pulsed with power, responding to Isolde's surge of emotion. Blood trickled down her face in fresh rivulets as the thorns dug deeper into her scalp. "And yet," she said through gritted teeth, "despite these warnings, these nightmares, Cassian still chose me, still defied you, still fought for our future." "A temporary madness," the king dismissed. "A weakness I myself once succumbed to before I understood the true price of such defiance." "Or perhaps," Isolde countered, drawing strength from the child within her, "it's not madness at all. Perhaps it's hope, the one thing your curse couldn't eradicate. The belief that there must be a better way than eternal vigilance and endless sacrifice." The king's expression darkened. "There is no better way," he snarled. "Only necessary cruelty or catastrophic ruin." With supernatural speed, he lunged toward her, a hidden blade appearing in his hand, a dagger of black glass aimed directly at her pregnant belly. "No!" Cassian cried, throwing himself between them. The obsidian blade sank into his chest with a sound like ice cracking, its tip emerging from his back in a spray of immortal blood. The king's eyes widened in genuine shock, not at the fact that his son had intervened, but that the blade had penetrated Cassian's immortal flesh at all. "What have you done?" he whispered, releasing the dagger's hilt as Cassian staggered backward. Through their bond, Isolde felt Cassian's pain as if it were her own, a cold, spreading numbness unlike any wound he had ever suffered. This was no ordinary blade. This was something ancient, something crafted specifically to kill immortals. "Cassian!" she screamed, catching him as he collapsed. Blood, unnaturally dark, almost black, poured from the wound. Through their connection, she felt something worse than pain. She felt him fading, his immortal essence dissolving wherever the blade's poison spread. The king stood motionless, his expression flickering between triumph and horror. "It wasn't meant for him," he said softly. "The void blade was meant for you. A clean death. A merciful end." There's nothing merciful about you, Isolde snarled, cradling Cassian's head in her lap. Through their bond, she pushed her strength into him, trying desperately to counter the blade's insidious magic. You don't understand, the king said, taking a step toward them. That blade was forged beyond the veil. Its touch extinguishes immortal essence permanently. There is no recovery from such a wound, no healing, no resurrection. When an immortal dies by the void blade, they are truly gone, their souls scattered like ash on the wind. Cassian coughed, black blood staining his lips. Always so dramatic. Father, he managed, though the effort clearly cost him. Isolde felt his life slipping away through their bond, not the quick, clean death of a mortal, but the slow, agonizing dissolution of something ancient and powerful. The blade wasn't just killing him, it was erasing him from existence itself. No, she whispered, tears mingling with the blood from her crown. I won't let this happen. I won't lose you. Through their connection, she could feel the blade's poison spreading through his system, cold, implacable, unyielding. It moved like living darkness, consuming everything in its path. Without conscious thought, she reached through their bond, not just with emotional strength this time, but with her entire being. She grasped the spreading darkness and pulled. The effect was immediate and devastating. The poison flowed from Cassian's wound into her own body, drawn through the mystical connection they shared. Cold fire erupted in her veins as the blade's magic transferred to her mortal form. Cassian's eyes flew open in horror. "What are you doing?" he gasped, feeling the poison leave his body only to enter hers. "What I must," she replied simply. The king watched in disbelief as the wound in Cassian's chest began to close, the black veins receding from his immortal flesh. At the same time, similar veins appeared on Isolde's skin, spreading outward from her heart in a web of darkness. "Impossible," the king whispered. "The Void Blade's magic cannot be transferred, cannot be survived." "Perhaps not by one alone," Isolde said, her voice strained as the poison worked through her system. "But we are not alone. We are bound. Blood to blood, soul to soul, death to death." The thorn crown pulsed with renewed power, responding to her sacrifice. Blood flowed freely down her face now, no longer in rivulets but in streams that soaked her white shift, turning it crimson. "Stop this," Cassian begged, regaining his strength even as she weakened. "Let it take me instead." "No," she said with surprising firmness. "The child needs you. The kingdom needs you. I've seen what happens when fathers abandon their duty." She looked pointedly at King Renatus, who stood frozen in shock, watching the impossible transfer of magic through their bond. "Your sacrifice was commendable," she told the king, "but your method was flawed. You chose fear instead of hope, control instead of trust, isolation instead of connection." The king's expression hardened once more. "Pretty words," he sneered, "from a dying woman. The blade's magic will consume you completely, and your abomination with you. Then Cassian will understand, as I did, the true cost of defying the natural order." "Natural order," Isolde repeated, a strange smile spreading across her blood-streaked face. "You keep using that phrase. I don't think it means what you think it means." With trembling hands, she reached up and grasped the thorn crown, not to remove it, but to press it deeper into her flesh. Fresh blood flowed as the thorns penetrated further, but instead of weakening her, this voluntary pain seemed to grant her strength. "The old temples taught that blood freely given holds more power than blood forcibly taken," she said, her voice growing stronger despite the poison spreading through her system. "The Ash Rite bound us, not just in life, but in death. And the crown you feared, the crown you sought to use against me, has already worked its transformation. The king's confidence faltered as he observed the change coming over her. The veins of darkness spreading beneath her skin didn't consume her as they should have. Instead, they began to glow with an inner silver light, as if the poison itself were being transmuted by the magic of her sacrifice. "What are you?" he whispered. "What you could have been," she replied simply. "Had you chosen love over fear? Had you sought understanding instead of control?" She extended her hand, palm up, fingers spread wide. With her other hand, she grasped the obsidian dagger still embedded in Cassian's chest and pulled it free. Instead of casting it aside, she used its razor edge to slice deeply across her offered palm. Blood welled forth, no longer purely crimson, but shot through with threads of silver and black, a physical manifestation of her transformation. "Blood calls to blood," she intoned, the words carrying the weight of ancient ritual. "Life calls to life. Death calls to death." She flipped her hand, allowing the mixed blood to fall to the floor of the throne room. Where it struck the marble, it sizzled and spread, forming patterns that resembled the runes etched into the temple walls where she and Cassian had performed the ash rite. The king took an involuntary step backward, genuine fear replacing calculation in his ancient eyes. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "What spell is this?" "No spell," Isolde replied. "A choice, a rebalancing." The blood-drawn runes began to glow with the same silver-black light that now pulsed beneath her skin. The marble floor trembled, hairline cracks spreading outward from where her blood had fallen. "When you encountered those creatures beyond the veil," she continued, her voice taking on an otherworldly resonance, "you didn't ask why they came. You didn't seek to understand the imbalance that drew them. You simply built walls, enforced separation, ensured that nothing could cross between worlds, not understanding that it was that very separation which created the hunger that drew them in the first place. You know nothing," the king snarled, but uncertainty had entered his voice. "I know what your memories showed me," Isolde countered. "I know what the knife's transformation revealed. I know what the thorn crown has whispered. The veil between worlds was never meant to be absolute. It was meant to be permeable, allowing balance, preventing the stagnation that occurs when any realm is completely isolated." The cracks in the floor widened, revealing not the castle foundations, but a swirling vortex of light and shadow, a glimpse of something beyond mortal comprehension. "Your 1,000-year reign wasn't protecting this world," Isolde said, each word striking like a physical blow. "It was slowly suffocating it, creating the very imbalance you feared." The king's composure shattered completely. With a roar of denial, he lunged for her, hands outstretched to throttle the life from her before she could complete whatever ritual her blood had begun. But Cassian was there, his strength restored by her sacrifice, his blade intercepting his father's charge. "No more," he said simply, driving his sword through the king's heart. King Renatus staggered backward, immortal blood flowing from the wound, but unlike a mortal injury, this would heal given time. He looked down at the blade in shock, then back at his son with something almost like pride. "At last," he whispered, "you become what I raised you to be, what I needed you to be." "No," Cassian replied, twisting the blade. "I become what you could never be, someone who trusts in love more than fear." The king laughed bitterly, even as black blood bubbled from his lips. "Love," he spat, "the poison that doomed me, that will doom you too in time." "Perhaps," Cassian acknowledged, "but I'd rather be doomed by love than saved by fear." Behind them, Isolde rose to her feet, the thorn crown blazing with silver fire, her blood-marked hands extended toward the king. "Renatus of House Valenhart," she intoned, "first of your name, last of your reign. You who sought to maintain the veil through tyranny and blood. You who feared change more than stagnation. Your time ends now." The blood runes at her feet pulsed in rhythm with her words, the cracks in the marble floor widening further. The vortex beneath grew stronger, a wind rising from its depths that smelled of lightning and possibilities. "What is this?" the king demanded, genuine fear in his voice for the first time in centuries. "What have you summoned?" "Nothing," Isolde replied simply. "I've released what was always here, waiting beneath the surface of your control. The natural balance you disrupted for 1,000 years." The vortex reached upward, tendrils of light and shadow wrapping around the king's ankles, climbing his body like living vines. Where they touched, his immortal flesh began to crumble like ancient parchment. "No," he gasped, struggling against the inexorable pull. "You don't understand what you've done, what you've unleashed." "I understand better than you ever could," Isolde replied, her voice gentle despite the terrible power she wielded. "Because I stand between worlds, as our child does. I see both sides of the veil now." The light consumed the king more rapidly, his body dissolving not into dust or ash, but into motes of light that were drawn into the vortex beneath the throne room floor. "Cassian," he called desperately to his son, "you must continue my work. You must maintain the veil. You must—" His final words were lost as his form collapsed completely, drawn into the swirling maelstrom beneath the castle. For a moment, his face remained visible in the patterns of light and shadow, ancient, sorrowful, finally at peace, before it too dissolved into the vortex. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the portal closed. The marble floor sealed itself, the blood runes fading to leave only faint scars in the stone, like memories of a fevered dream. In the sudden silence, Cassian turned to Isolde, only to find her collapsing, the thorn crown's fire dimming, the silver-black veins beneath her skin pulsing with diminishing light. "No," he gasped, catching her before she could strike the floor. "Isolde!" She looked up at him, her eyes clear despite the poison still visible beneath her skin. "The blade's magic," she whispered. "It still works through me. I only delayed it, didn't defeat it." "Then I'll take it back," he said desperately. "I'll pull it through the bond as you did for me." She shook her head weakly. "It doesn't work that way. What's given cannot be returned. What's chosen cannot be undone." Around them, the throne room had grown unnaturally quiet, as if the very stones of Valenhart Castle held their breath. Through the shattered windows, the light of dawn painted golden patterns across the blood-stained floor, highlighting the empty obsidian throne that now stood unclaimed. "You can't leave me," Cassian whispered, cradling her against his chest. "Not now. Not when we've won." "Have we?" she asked, a ghost of a smile touching her bloodied lips. "Or have we simply changed the nature of the battle?" Through their bond, he felt her slipping away, not with the violent dissolution the void blade had inflicted on him, but with a gentle, inexorable fading, like twilight surrendering to night. "The child," he said desperately. "Our child needs you. I need you." "The child will live," she assured him, one hand moving to her belly where the air still grew, somehow protected from the blade's poison. "I've ensured that much. As for you—" Her eyes met his, filled with a love so profound it transcended the approaching darkness. "You'll learn to rule without me, to be the king your father could never be." "I don't want to be king," he said fiercely, "not without you beside me." "Then be something else," she suggested, her voice growing fainter. "Be what the kingdom truly needs, not a ruler but a guardian, not a tyrant, but a guide." The thorn crown's fire had faded completely now, the thorns retracting from her flesh, leaving behind scars that resembled a constellation mapped across her brow. The blood that had flowed so freely was drying, turning to a crimson mask that emphasized the growing pallor of her skin. "I can't do this alone," he whispered, tears falling freely now, immortal grief given physical form. "You won't be," she promised. The bond remains, different perhaps, changed certainly, but unbroken. As if to prove her words, a pulse of warmth flowed through their connection, weaker than before but undeniably present, a reminder that what they had forged could not be entirely undone, even by death itself. "When the veil thins," she murmured, her eyes beginning to close, "listen for my voice. When the moon is dark, look for my shadow. I'll find ways back to you, my love. Death is not the end of us." Her breathing slowed, each exhalation a little softer than the last. Through the bond, Cassian felt her consciousness dispersing, not into nothingness as the king had feared, but into something vast and luminous that defied comprehension. "Stay with me," he begged, but he could feel the futility of his plea. Her eyes opened one last time, clear and bright, despite the shadow of death that gathered around her. "Rule well," she whispered. "Love our child. Remember that fear is the enemy, not change." Then she was gone, her body still warm in his arms, but the vital spark that had made her Isolde extinguished like a candle in the wind. Cassian threw back his head and howled, a sound of such primal grief that it shook the very foundations of Valenhart Castle. The remaining stained glass windows shattered, raining coloured fragments across the throne room like frozen tears. For hours he knelt there, cradling her body, refusing to acknowledge the finality of her departure. Through their bond, still present but altered, like a limb that remains in phantom sensation after amputation, he searched desperately for any trace of her consciousness. None of his companions dared approach. The rebels who had followed him, the guards who had turned against their king, all maintained a respectful distance, forming a protective perimeter around the throne room while their leader mourned. It was Lord Darius who finally entered, his ancient face solemn with shared grief. "My prince," he said softly, using the title despite knowing it no longer applied. "The kingdom awaits your command. The king's loyalists have surrendered. The Blood Legion stands down." Cassian didn't respond, his gaze fixed on Isolde's still face. "The child lives," Darius continued gently. "I can sense its heartbeat, still strong within her. But we must act quickly if it is to survive its mother's passing." This, at last, penetrated Cassian's grief. He looked up, his immortal eyes red-rimmed with tears that should have been impossible for his kind. "How?" he asked, his voice raw. "The ancients had rituals for such circumstances," Darius explained. "Ways to preserve a child when its mother died before birth. But they require sacrifices." "I'll give anything," Cassian said immediately. "I know," Darius replied, his expression grave. "That's what worries me." With infinite tenderness, Cassian gathered Isolde's body into his arms and rose to his feet. The obsidian throne loomed behind him, empty, waiting, a symbol of the power he had never wanted, and now could not escape. "Prepare the ritual," he commanded, his voice finding strength in purpose. "Whatever it requires, I will provide. The child must live." "And the kingdom?" Darius asked carefully. "The throne stands empty. In the absence of leadership, civil war will erupt anew." Cassian looked at the throne that had been his father's for a millennium, a seat of power built on fear and control, on separation and isolation. In his arms, Isolde's body grew colder with each passing moment, but the child within her still lived. A miracle beyond explanation, a hope beyond reason. "The throne remains empty," he decided, turning his back on the obsidian seat. "Let Valenhart know that I will not rule as king. I will serve as regent only until the rightful heir comes of age." Understanding dawned in Darius's ancient eyes. "The child," he whispered. "You intend for Isolde's child to rule." "Our child," Cassian corrected, "born of both realms, the bridge between worlds that the prophecy foretold." He looked down at Isolde's still face, peaceful now in death's embrace. "She understood what my father never could, that the veil between worlds was never meant to be absolute. That balance requires connection, not isolation. Our child will embody that truth in ways neither of us could alone. Outside the throne room, dawn had fully broken, painting the broken kingdom in the gentle light of a new day. Smoke still rose from parts of the castle where fighting had been fiercest, but the sounds of battle had been replaced by the tentative stirrings of recovery. She will be honored, Darius promised, her sacrifice remembered for generations to come. Not as a martyr, Cassian insisted, but as a queen, the only true queen Valenhart has ever known, however briefly. He carried her body toward the chamber door, each step measured and deliberate, as if he could delay the inevitable by moving slowly enough. "Prepare the ritual," he repeated. "We have a child to save." And in the empty throne room behind them, something stirred in the shadows beneath the obsidian throne, something ancient and patient, neither benevolent nor malevolent, but simply watchful. Something that had waited 1,000 years for the veil to thin, for balance to be restored. Something that whispered a single word into the silence: begin. Chapter 21. Love Eternal. The blood sanctum lay beneath the lowest levels of Valenhart Castle, older than the fortress itself. Carved from the living rock of the mountain, its walls predated even King Renatus's reign. A place of ancient power where the first vampires had performed rituals that blurred the boundaries between life and death. No torches lit this sacred space. No windows admitted the gentle dawn breaking over the kingdom above. Instead, luminous crystals embedded in the ceiling cast a bloody glow over the chamber, their light pulsing in rhythm with some unseen heartbeat. In the center of the sanctum stood a stone altar, its surface worn smooth by countless ceremonies. The rock itself was a peculiar shade of obsidian that seemed to drink the crimson light rather than reflect it. Channels carved into its surface spiraled toward a central basin, pathways for blood to flow during the most sacred of vampire rites. It was here that Cassian carried Isolde's lifeless body. Lord Darius led the way, his ancient form moving with purpose through the winding corridors that descended into the mountain's heart. Behind them came Veil, somehow alive despite the battle at the temple, her weathered hands clutching a leather satchel filled with ingredients gathered at terrible cost. A small procession of the most trusted rebels followed, those who had fought beside them, those who had witnessed the fall of a king and the death of a queen. None spoke. What words could possibly matter now? Cassian's face might have been carved from the same stone as the altar. His eyes, normally vibrant with immortal fire, had dulled to the flat crimson of old blood. In his arms, Isolde lay still and pale. The thorn crown's marks etched permanently into her skin, silver scars that formed a constellation across her forehead. "Here," Darius said, stopping before the altar. "Lay her there." With infinite tenderness, Cassian placed Isolde's body on the obsidian surface. Her white shift, stained with blood and battle, spread around her like broken wings. Her silver-streaked hair spilled over the edge of the altar, still faintly luminous despite death's touch. "The child still lives," Veil confirmed, placing gnarled fingers on Isolde's abdomen. "But weakening. We must work quickly." Cassian nodded, his movements mechanical. "Tell me what to do." The witch exchanged glances with Lord Darius, a silent communication passing between them. "The ritual requires blood," she finally said. "More blood than any single vampire can give, even one as powerful as you." "Take what you need from me," Cassian replied without hesitation. "It won't be enough," Darius said gently. "The Void Blade's poison still lingers in her system, fighting the transformation the knife began. To overcome it, to complete the change that will save both her and the child, we need blood from multiple sources. Blood freely given. Blood with power." "The court will provide," Cassian said, turning to the small gathering of rebels who had followed them. "Any who would see our child live, any who would honor Isolde's sacrifice." "We cannot use just any blood," Veil interrupted. "The ritual requires blood of the ancient lines, Pure blood, royal blood. Cassian's face hardened. My father is gone. I am the last of House Valenhart. Not the last, came a voice from the shadows at the chamber's edge. A figure stepped forward, tall, regal, wrapped in midnight silk embroidered with silver thread. As she entered the crimson light, her face became visible, ageless, beautiful, with eyes that had witnessed centuries pass, like seasons. Lady Seraphina of House Morvain, ruler of the Northern Territories, one of the oldest vampires still living. Aunt Seraphina, Cassian breathed, genuine surprise breaking through his grief. How? Word travels quickly when kings fall, she replied, her voice like velvet over steel. I may have despised your father, nephew, but blood calls to blood. And today, yours calls rather loudly. She approached the altar, her movements fluid as water. House Morvain shares ancestry with House Valenhart, though your father preferred to forget that inconvenient truth. My blood carries the same ancient power as yours, and I have not spent my strength in battle as you have. Cassian stared at her, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Why would you help us? You've remained neutral in our conflicts for centuries. Lady Seraphina's perfect lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. Perhaps I tire of neutrality. Perhaps I see opportunity in change. Her gaze shifted to Isolde's still form. Or perhaps I simply wished to see for myself the mortal girl who accomplished what generations of immortals could not, who brought down the undying king and rewrote prophecy itself. She reached out one elegant hand, hovering it over Isolde's brow where the crown's scars created their silver constellation. Remarkable, she murmured. Even in death she defies the natural order. The child should have died with her, yet it persists. Her eyes lifted to Cassian's. I find I'm curious what other impossibilities might manifest if she were to live. Curiosity seems a thin motivation to bleed for us, Cassian said cautiously. Then call it investment in the future, Lady Seraphina replied with a careless shrug. Your father's reign is ended. Someone must shape what comes next. I prefer to have some influence in that process. Before Cassian could respond, Varel stepped forward. We require 7 bloodlines for the ritual, she said, her practical tone cutting through the tension. House Valenhart, House Morvain. We still need 5 more of the ancient blood. Perhaps I can be of assistance there as well, Lady Seraphina said smoothly, gesturing toward the chamber entrance. 5 more figures emerged from the shadows, each bearing the unmistakable aura of age and power that marked the oldest vampire houses. Lord Erebus of House Nocturne, his white hair cascading over shoulders draped in fur and silver. Lady Melusine of House Revenant, her eyes the colour of Arctic ice, her movements as fluid as her house's water magic. The twins, Vesper and Valerian of House Dusk, identical in their beauty, opposite in their temperaments. And finally, grave Thanatos of House Mortis, whose family had overseen the rituals of immortal death since the First Age. The high houses answer the call of blood, Lady Seraphina said, satisfaction evident in her tone. For the first time in a millennium, we gather without your father's command. Consider it a coronation gift. Cassian looked from face to face, reading the calculation in each immortal gaze. These were not allies arriving out of compassion or loyalty. These were ancient powers positioning themselves in the vacuum left by his father's fall. Yet their presence, their blood, might be the only hope of saving Isolde and their child. 7 bloodlines, Varel confirmed, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. 7 sources of power, freely given. It might be enough. It must be enough, Cassian said, his attention returning to Isolde's still form. What must we do? The witch began unpacking her satchel, laying out ancient implements on a smaller table of stone beside the altar. The ritual has 3 parts, she explained, her gnarled hands moving with practiced efficiency despite their trembling. First, the blood gathering. Then, the bonding of essences. Finally, the crossing. The crossing? Cassian asked. It was Thanatos who answered, his deep voice resonating in the chamber like distant thunder. Someone must go to the Veil and call her back, he said solemnly. Someone connected to her by bonds stronger than death. Someone willing to risk being trapped on the other side if they fail. I'll go, Cassian said without hesitation. Of course you will, Lady Seraphina murmured, amusement evident in her tone. So predictable, nephew. So human in your devotion. Begin the ritual, he commanded, ignoring her barb. Time grows short. Virel nodded, lifting a ceremonial blade from her collection, a curved dagger of silver and bone, its edge impossibly sharp. Each bloodline must contribute to the vessel, she instructed, indicating a large chalice of black crystal that sat in the centre of her implements. 7 cuts, 7 offerings, freely given with intent. Lady Seraphina stepped forward first, extending her wrist with casual elegance. I, Seraphina of House Morvain, give my blood freely for this working, she intoned, the formal words carrying weight in the ancient chamber. Virel drew the blade across the offered wrist, allowing the dark blood to flow into the chalice. Each of the High House lords and ladies followed suit, offering their blood with the same formal declaration, their ancient power filling the air with a pressure that made it difficult to breathe. Finally, only Cassian remained. He approached the altar where Isolde lay, taking her cold hand in his. I, Cassian of House Valenhart, give my blood freely for this working, he said, his voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. Not as prince, not as heir, but as husband, as father to our child, as the one who would follow you beyond the veil itself. Virel hesitated, the ceremonial blade hovering above his extended wrist. You've already lost much blood in battle, she warned. The crossing will require what strength remains to you. Take what is needed, he insisted. I'll find strength elsewhere. With a nod of understanding, the witch drew the blade across his wrist, opening a wound deeper than those she had inflicted on the others. Cassian didn't flinch as his blood flowed into the chalice, mingling with that of the ancient houses. When the vessel was filled to the precise measure required, Virel bound his wound with a strip of black silk. Now, she said, turning to the gathered immortals, the bonding of essences. Each house must contribute more than blood. Each must offer the element of their power. Lord Erebus stepped forward, removing a vial of midnight oil from his robes. House Nocturne offers darkness, he declared, pouring the viscous liquid into the blood-filled chalice. Where it touched the mingled blood, it did not float, but sank, dispersing into threads of deepest black. Lady Melusine followed, a single tear falling from her arctic eyes into the mixture. House Revenant offers memory, she said, her voice like distant chimes. The twins Vesper and Valerian approached together, each holding a small pouch. House Dusk offers twilight, Vesper said, emptying her pouch of silver dust into the chalice. And dawn, Valerian added, his contribution a golden powder that sparkled as it dissolved into the thickening mixture. Thanatos of House Mortis produced a small bone flute, carved with symbols too ancient to decipher. He played a single haunting note over the chalice, the sound vibrating the very air around them. House Mortis offers passage, he intoned when the note faded to silence. Lady Seraphina removed a ring from her elegant finger, a band of platinum set with a stone that seemed to contain a universe of stars. She dropped it into the chalice without ceremony. House Morvain offers power, she said simply. All eyes turned to Cassian, standing beside Isolde's still form. What does House Valenhart offer? Virel prompted gently. He placed his hand over Isolde's heart, feeling the terrible stillness beneath his palm. Through their bond, altered but not destroyed by death, he reached for her, finding only echoes where her vibrant presence had been. House Valenhart offers love, he said, his voice breaking on the final word. Not as the poets describe it, not as the songs celebrate it, but as we lived it, imperfect, difficult, chosen again and again despite every reason to surrender. From his pocket he withdrew a small object, wrapped in midnight silk, a ring he had commissioned in secret, meant as a gift to replace the hasty bond token they had exchanged during the ash rite. Its band was forged from the same silver as the knife that had begun her transformation, its stone a drop of his own blood crystallized through ancient magic. He placed it in the chalice, where it sank to the bottom, pulsing with a light all its own. Virel nodded, satisfaction evident in her weathered features. The offering is complete, she declared. Now comes the crossing. At her direction, the assembled immortals arranged themselves in a circle around the altar where Isolde lay. Virel placed the chalice at the head of the stone slab, its contents now a swirling vortex of power and intent. The veil thins in this place, she explained to Cassian, who stood at Isolde's side, still clutching her cold hand. Thinner still between those bound as you are. You must drink of the combined essence, then. You must drink of her. Cassian's eyes widened slightly. Of Isolde? But she's dead, Thanatos confirmed bluntly. Yes, that is precisely why her blood now contains the pathway you seek. Death has opened the door. You must walk through it. Will I return? Cassian asked, though the answer would not change his course. If your bond is as strong as you believe, Lady Seraphina said, studying her nephew with newfound respect. If not, she shrugged elegantly, then my curiosity will remain unsatisfied. Virel handed him the chalice, its weight greater than its size would suggest. Drink, she instructed, all of it. Then open her veins and take what remains of her life's blood. It will guide you to where her spirit waits. The liquid in the chalice seemed alive, shifting and swirling with currents of power from the 7 bloodlines and their offered essences. Its scent was intoxicating, not merely the copper tang of blood, but something deeper, more primal, a fragrance that spoke of beginnings and endings intertwined. Cassian raised the chalice to his lips. For you, he whispered to Isolde. For our child. For the future we fought to create. He drank deeply, not pausing even as the combined power of 7 ancient bloodlines burned through his system like liquid fire. The essence of House Nocturne brought darkness closing in around his vision. House Revenant's contribution flooded him with memories, his own and others, centuries of experience not his own. The twins' offerings of twilight and dawn created a disorienting sense of time suspended, moments stretching into eternity and collapsing back to instants. House Mortis's essence opened his perception, allowing him to see the thin places where the veil between worlds grew transparent. House Morvaine's power surged through him, amplifying his own considerable strength to heights he had never experienced. And at the center of it all, his own contribution, love, raw and uncompromising, providing purpose and direction to the chaotic forces now coursing through his immortal body. When the chalice was empty, Cassian set it aside, his movements no longer entirely his own. The combined essence guided him now, ancient instincts awakened by the ritual. With hands that suddenly seemed distant from his consciousness, he lifted Isolde's arm and brought her wrist to his mouth. Forgive me, he whispered against her cold skin. His fangs, sharper now, changed by the ritual's power, pierced her flesh with terrible ease. Blood flowed, though her heart no longer beat to propel it. A final gift from a body that had already given everything. It tasted of mortality, of transformation interrupted, of possibilities unfulfilled. It tasted of Isolde, the essence of everything she had been and might yet become. As her blood flowed into him, the chamber around him began to dissolve. The concerned faces of the high house lords and ladies blurred into indistinct shapes. Virel's murmured instructions faded to unintelligible whispers. Even the solid stone of the altar beneath Isolde seemed to lose substance, becoming mist and memory. Cassian felt himself falling, not downward but inward, through layers of consciousness and reality that had always existed but remained hidden from mortal and immortal perception alike. The bond between himself and Isolde became his only anchor, a golden thread stretching into impossible distances. He followed it, pulled by the weight of his love and the combined power of 7 ancient bloodlines. The world through which he travelled defied description, neither light nor dark, neither solid nor void, a realm of pure potential where thought became form and desire shaped reality. The golden thread led onward, sometimes thinning to a barely visible filament, sometimes broadening to a pathway that shimmered beneath his feet. He moved with purpose, guided by the certainty that Isolde waited somewhere ahead, her spirit held in the balance between worlds, unable to move forward or return without his call. After what might have been moments or millennia, the formless realm began to take shape around him. A forest materialized, not the vibrant woods of the living world, but a place of silver trees and silent shadows, leaves that never rustled, branches that never swayed. The ground beneath his feet solidified into a path of pale stone that wound between the spectral trunks. At the path's end stood a figure in white, her back turned to him, silver-streaked hair cascading down her shoulders. Even from behind, even in this place of half-formed reality, he would know her anywhere. "Isolde," he called, his voice echoing strangely in the silent forest. She turned slowly, her movements dreamlike, her face, still bearing the constellation scars from the thorn crown, held a serenity he had never seen in life, a peace untouched by the struggles they had endured together. "Cassian," she replied, her voice distant yet clear. "You shouldn't be here." He stepped closer, reaching for her hand only to find his own passing through hers like mist through mist. "I've come to bring you back," he said urgently. "Our child lives. There's still time." A shadow of pain crossed her serene features. "The void blade's poison," she reminded him. "It cannot be overcome. Not even here." "We've found a way," he insisted. "The ancient houses have gathered. Their blood, their essence, combined with the bond we share, it can complete the transformation the knife began. It can make you something the poison cannot touch." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Vampire," she whispered. "Yes." She glanced down at her spectral form, then at the silver forest surrounding them. "I don't know if I can return," she admitted. "The current pulls me forward, not back. And there's a peace here I never knew in life." Cassian felt desperation rising within him. "Our child needs you," he pleaded. "I need you. The kingdom needs you. Everything we fought for." "Will continue without me if it must," she finished gently. "You would be a good father, Cassian, a good ruler." "Not without you," he said fiercely. "Not alone." She stepped closer, her ethereal form rippling like water. "The choice isn't simple," she explained, gesturing to the path that continued beyond her into the silver forest. "What waits ahead calls to me. To turn back, there would be a price." "Name it," he said without hesitation. "Whatever the cost, I'll pay it." "Not your price to pay," she corrected softly. "Mine, to return as something other than what I was, to exist between worlds, neither fully mortal nor truly immortal, to carry the thirst that has driven your kind since the first age." "You would still be Isolde," Cassian insisted. "Still yourself. Still the woman I bound my soul to in the Temple of Dusk." She studied him, her gaze penetrating beyond flesh and bone to the essence beneath. "You believe that," she acknowledged. "But do you know it?" He reached for her again, frustration mounting as his hands passed through her form. "I know only that I cannot lose you," he admitted, his voice breaking. that our child deserves to know its mother, that the world needs the wisdom you brought to it, compassion for the mortal realm combined with understanding of immortal concerns. A wind that shouldn't exist in this spectral place stirred the silver leaves, carrying whispers that might have been voices or merely the echoes of memory. Isolde turned her head, listening to something Cassian couldn't hear. "Time grows short," she said, returning her attention to him. "The ritual sustains your presence here, but not indefinitely. Soon the current will sweep us both onward, beyond recall." "Then come back with me," he urged. "Choose life, even changed life, over peaceful oblivion." "Is that what you think waits beyond?" she asked, genuine curiosity in her tone. "Oblivion? I don't know," he admitted. "I know only the world we shared, the love we built, the future we imagined together." She reached for him, her ethereal fingers brushing his face without physical sensation, yet somehow conveying her touch nonetheless. "You crossed the veil for me," she said wonderingly. "Risked your immortal soul." "I would do it again," he said simply. 1,000 times. In 1,000 lives. Something shifted in her expression. Resolution replacing serenity, determination overcoming peace. "The bond between us," she said, her voice stronger now. "It remains even here. I feel it. Altered, but unbroken." "Yes," he confirmed. "Death hasn't severed it. Nothing can." "Then, perhaps—" She glanced back at the path leading deeper into the silver forest, then returned her gaze to Cassian. "Perhaps that's enough to find our way back." Hope surged within him. "You'll return?" "I'll try," she amended carefully. "But Cassian, if I come back changed, if the woman who returns is not entirely the one you remember—" "I will love her just the same," he vowed, "as fiercely, as completely, as eternally." She smiled then, the familiar, determined smile that had first captured his heart in the temple gardens. "Then, let us begin the journey home," she said, extending her hand to him once more. This time when he reached for her, their fingers connected, not with physical sensation but with something deeper, a recognition of soul meeting soul. The golden thread of their bond brightened, expanding to surround them both in a cocoon of shared memory and purpose. "Hold fast to me," Cassian instructed, feeling the ritual's power beginning to pull him back toward the living world. "Think of our child. Think of Valenhart. Think of the moon room where we first danced." Isolde's form wavered, her grip on his soul hand tightening. "I remember," she whispered, "the way the light fell through the windows, the scent of roses, your hand at my waist." "Yes," he encouraged as the silver forest began to dissolve around them. "The music, the beating of your heart, the first time I allowed myself to want something beyond duty and station." The journey back was more difficult than the passage in, like swimming against a powerful current, each moment a struggle to maintain their connection. Isolde's form flickered and faded several times, the golden bond stretching dangerously thin before snapping back into resilience. "Stay with me," Cassian pleaded, as reality shifted and blurred around them. "We're almost there." "The poison," she gasped, her voice distant again. "It still burns. It still tries to scatter me." "Fight it," he urged. "You're stronger. Our bond is stronger." The void between worlds pressed in around them, hungry and ancient, resentful of souls attempting to defy its laws. Cassian felt it picking at his essence, seeking weaknesses, attempting to separate him from Isolde and send them spiraling in different directions. In desperation, he did the only thing he could think of. He poured his immortality into the bond between them, offering his ancient strength to combat the void's hunger. The golden thread transformed, becoming a river of power that flowed both ways, carrying his immortal essence to her and returning with something uniquely hers: her determination, her compassion, her uncompromising will. With a sound like the breaking of ancient seals, the void released them. Reality rushed back with dizzying speed. the blood sanctum materializing around them, the concerned faces of the high house lords and ladies coming into focus, the solid feel of the altar beneath them. Cassian found himself collapsed across Isolde's still form, the chalice overturned beside them, his fangs still in her wrist, though no more blood flowed. With trembling hands he withdrew, closing the wound with a gentle touch. "Isolde," he whispered, searching her face for any sign of life. The gathered immortals watched in tense silence. Veil stood at the altar's head, her ancient face unreadable. Lady Seraphina leaned forward slightly, undisguised curiosity in her ageless eyes. Nothing happened. "No," Cassian breathed, despair crushing through him like a physical weight. "We were so close. I felt her with me. I felt her return." "The crossing is difficult even for the strongest souls," Thanatos said solemnly. "The veil does not relinquish its claims easily." "She was strong enough," Cassian insisted. "I know she was." He gathered her into his arms, cradling her against his chest as he had done in the throne room when her life first slipped away. "Come back to me," he whispered against her hair. "Please, Isolde, find your way home." It began as the faintest of tremors, a movement so slight it might have been his imagination or the product of desperate hope. Then came a sound, soft, barely audible even to immortal hearing, the whisper of air entering lungs that had been still for hours. Cassian froze, afraid to hope, afraid to move lest he disrupt whatever miracle might be unfolding. Beneath his hands, her skin, cold as marble since her death, began to warm, not with the flush of mortal life but with something different, something changed. Her eyelids fluttered once, twice, then opened. The eyes that met his were not quite the ones he remembered, the warm brown now ringed with a circle of crimson, like dawn breaking through the darkness. More beautiful for the contrast, more powerful for the change. "Cassian," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse, from the passage between worlds. "You found me." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. "I would have torn apart the veil itself to reach you," he said, unable to keep his hands from tracing her face, her throat, her shoulders, reassuring himself of her solid presence. She tried to sit up, then gasped as new sensations flooded her transformed body. "Everything is different," she murmured, looking around the sanctum with eyes that saw more clearly, heard more acutely, sensed more deeply than her mortal form ever could. "So bright, so loud." "The transformation is complete," Veil confirmed, studying Isolde with professional interest. "The Void Blade's poison has been neutralized. The child is safe." At the mention of their child, Isolde's hands flew to her abdomen, where the small heartbeat continued undisturbed. "I felt it," she said wonderingly, "even beyond the veil. I felt its life calling to me." The high house lords and ladies exchanged glances of varying degrees of shock and calculation. It was Lady Seraphina who finally broke the silence, her perfect features arranged in an expression of reluctant admiration. "Well, nephew," she said dryly, "it seems your devotion has accomplished what centuries of ritual and scholarship deemed impossible. Death reversed, the veil traversed, a soul reclaimed." She inclined her head slightly toward Isolde. "Welcome back, Lady Valenhart. Your return promises to make the coming years interesting." Isolde struggled to sit fully upright, Cassian supporting her with gentle hands. "I'm not who I was," she said, her attention focused on him rather than the assembled immortals. "The Void Blade's poison, the ritual, the crossing, they've changed me in ways I'm only beginning to understand." "But your soul remains," he assured her. "Your essence, the part of you that makes you Isolde." "Yes," she agreed, a small smile touching her lips. "That remains." Her new eyes took in the chamber, the ancient immortals who had contributed their blood to her resurrection, the evidence of ritual magic that had bent the laws of existence to bring her back. "So much sacrifice," she murmured, "so much power expended for one life." Not just any life, Cassian corrected. Yours, the mother of the child who will bridge our worlds, the queen who will help rebuild what my father destroyed. She brought her hand to his face, marveling at the new sensitivity of her skin, the way his familiar features seemed both the same and somehow more vibrant to her transformed senses. I was ready to go, she admitted softly. There was peace waiting, an end to struggle. I know, he acknowledged, regret flickering across his features. Perhaps it was selfish to call you back. Perhaps, she agreed. But I chose to answer. I chose you. I chose our child. I chose this new existence, whatever it may bring. Her smile widened slightly, revealing the tips of fangs that hadn't been there before, delicate, perfect, deadly. Besides, I've never been very good at accepting the endings others wrote for me. Something that might have been a laugh escaped him, though it sounded more like a sob of relief. He gathered her close, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her scent. Change now. Deeper, richer, immortal rather than mortal, but still uniquely hers. Never leave me again, he whispered, words meant for her alone despite the immortal witnesses surrounding them. Death couldn't hold me, she reminded him, her arms tightening around him with new strength. What else could possibly succeed where it failed? And there, in the ancient blood's sanctum, surrounded by the most powerful vampires in the kingdom, they clung to each other. Both changed, both scarred, both transformed by the trials they had endured. They wept without shame, immortal tears falling for everything lost and everything regained, for the death of what had been and the birth of what might yet become. Their bond, forged in ritual, tested in battle, proven stronger than death itself, pulsed between them, golden and unbreakable. Different now, as they were different, but no less true, no less eternal. Above them, dawn broke over a kingdom transformed, a world where the old king's ashes still smouldered, where prophecy had been both fulfilled and defied, where the future stretched before them, not as a burden of expectation, but as a canvas awaiting their creation. Together, they would paint it with choices rather than destiny. Together, they would write their own ending. Together, they would forge a love that even death had failed to conquer. Not perfect, not easy, but chosen again and again despite every reason to surrender. A love, quite simply, eternal.